Hey, I'm Kev, Mr. Kerr, and the 2015 Formula 1 season is right upon us now. So in this programme, we're looking ahead to that season. As incredibly in Australia, we have 10 teams there after a very up and down off-season for a few of them. One of them has rised up from the ashes of its former incarnation. Another has its star signing of the off-season at home, watching the Grand Prix this weekend, and another has got the circuit still chasing them around town as they are fighting one of their own drivers in a legal battle in the courts in Victoria in Australia. And so it's already been a very interesting Formula 1 season already, and it's barely even begun, as we will look at the 10 teams participating in the 2015 season, look at the 2015 calendar as well. There's been a couple of minor interesting changes to that. But firstly, you're going to look at some more rule changes, as there have been lots of minor rule changes added to the ever-increasing rule book that Formula 1 has. I'm sure it makes a great paperweight in an office at the FIA for someone. But there's been 3 rules in particular that have caught my eye that could really affect the 2015 Formula 1 season. Firstly, we're looking at the noses of the car and the front section of the car, an area that's been ever evolving since 2012, as in the previous years before that the front nose of the cars have been rising slightly, and it was an area of concern for the FIA, as on safety grounds, when you have an side-on impact, you could see the nose of the car kind of intrude on the cockpit, which we saw scarily enough almost happen in the Belgian Grand Prix a couple of years ago. So since then, the FIA have been trying to lower the nose tips of the cars to make sure that in a side-on impact they won't go over the top of the side pod and just go into that crash zone area where the side pods have been made wider in recent years, and go into that to dissipate the energy, and this energy goes into the drivers, which means that they're more likely to be uninjured in a side-on collision. And unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen the FIA kind of ham-fist their way through the front nose section of the car and the ruling of the front of the car. We particularly saw that last year of the wang noses, but this year it seems like they've got it kind of right. On the most part, the noses seem to be alright, unless you have a Regans and you kind of have the pimple at the front of the nose, but in general the cars in general look better than they have in recent years, and that means also a big impact on the aerodynamic effects at the front of the car and managing the airflow around the car, as well as last year you saw the likes of Cajun really have a raised kind of nose, and the front wing would slope down using that nose ring extension, and that would mean that they could still get lots of air underneath the car and really get to the rear of the car and the diffuser. That won't be the case this year though. Some teams will try and still kind of get some air under the car, but it'll be reduced, and so it's more about the airflow around the car and how to best manage that. And it seems like that hasn't really actually changed things at all, as the teams that looked to be at the front last year look to be at the front this year according to testing. But still, in development terms though, it could be very interesting going forward, seeing how teams develop this airflow around the front of the car to make it better around the car and make it better to go to the rear of the car and the diffuser, where we've lost all of that rear downforce in 2014, and how they can regain that and keep ever regaining that throughout the whole of the season like we saw last year. So yeah, the noses, they look different, they look better, but they're going to be a big area of concern, particularly for aerodynamic reasons this year, and for the FIA for safety reasons, even though they could still go under the car, those noses, as we saw in Australia last year. Then there's the virtual safety car. No, it's not an application for your Oculus Rift, but rather it's something we've seen introduced in recent years in endurance racing, such as 24 Hours of Dubai, and introduced to the 24 Hours of Le Mans last year. But Formula 1 has its own version this year, which sees drivers in, say, double wave lower flag zone have to significantly slow down as the delta time comes up on their dash and have to stick to a minimum time. So this makes it much safer for marshals to, say, remove debris or remove cars from the side or tracks during these zones and basically do their job, as without marshals there won't be racing, and remember, they're volunteers as well. And so anything to make marshals safer and do their job safer in a racing event is much better in my book. And it also means drivers have to respect the flags a bit more as well, unlike they've been doing in recent years. There's been a particular problem where drivers would just slow down for the minimum amount they had to do, just do a bit of a slower section in a time by tenths of a second rather than seconds in that section. And I remember Japanese Grand Prix qualifying, I think in 2009, was particularly chaotic when drivers just refused to respect the other flags, and lots of penalties were applied into like half a day to finally figure out the grid for that Grand Prix. So this is a very good rule to introduce, and this was introduced because of findings found in the accident report investigating the accident of Jules Bianchi's at the Japanese Grand Prix last year. And of course we're still saying Forza Jules. Finally, penalties and more penalties for the stewards to hand to drivers, even in situations out of their control, such as a crew member being on the grid with less than 15 seconds to go. The driver will get a drive-through penalty. I guess they can't really find teams when half the grid is in financial trouble. So yeah, if you're a driver nowadays, watch yourself, as there's a new 10-second penalty that can be applied in pit stops, or can be applied and added to their finishing time, as we saw the 5-second rule last year, which was super effective. And they've added a 10-second one this year. They've added stop-go penalties to certain situations. If you've got engine penalties, well, you're going to be even more harshly punished. And yeah, in general, I just wouldn't want to be a driver in modern F1. I'm going to be punished for loads of things, and most of them are out of my control. I'd rather go to IndyCar, I think. So now we look at the 2015 calendar, and it's got a very familiar structure to it, beginning in Australia this weekend, and it concludes under the lights in Abu Dhabi at the end of November. I'm sure it's going to be a long, wretched 8-month adventure for the teams and team members, where they're going to be exhausted by the end of it. But an expanded 20-race calendar this year has the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit in Mexico City, right in the center of Mexico City in Mexico, returns to the calendar after 23 years away. It's a back-to-back with the United States Grand Prix at the end of October, and the Mexican Grand Prix takes place on the 1st of November. And it returns with some renovation work having to be done to it, as it kind of fell into disrepair in the last few years, after last hosting, say, a Champ Car race in 2007 and NASCAR for a few years after that. And this renovation work to bring it up to modern safety standards has seen the death of perhaps the world-renowned and one of the most fearsome corners to have ever graced the Formula 1 calendar. The 180-degree Pertella corner, which was the last corner of the circuit, and saw Nigel Mansell show the biggest balls ever by passing Gerhard Berger around the outside of it in his Ferrari back in 1990. But a quarter of a century later, the F1 cars will instead go through a dilly-dally section in a baseball stadium, because we all love watching F1 cars go at national speed limits. So that's the Mexican Grand Prix return, and of course the renovation work has been overseen by Herman Tilke, and of course is very popular among all of us. Apart from the Mexican Grand Prix returning to the calendar, there's no real changes to it, apart from the German Grand Prix, as the Nürburgring was meant to host this year's event. Unfortunately, they can't afford to do that, so it looks like it's going to go back to the Hockenheim ring, such as we saw it host last year's German Grand Prix. Unfortunately, they can't really afford to host it as well, as we saw last year, it had pitiful attendance numbers. So they were a bit of a stalemate with this event sharing agreement that they entered into back in 2007-2008. So hopefully someone can host the German Grand Prix. Hopefully there's some money found somewhere, as there's quite a few important German drivers on the grid, even though they may not be the most popular even in Germany. So there's the calendar. There were a couple of failed attempts to get Grand Prix on the calendar this year. Perhaps infamously, the Korean Grand Prix was put on the provisional calendar list, to the surprise of everyone, including the organisers of the Korean Grand Prix. So it's a bit unsurprising that has vanished from the calendar. The Indian Grand Prix, which was dropped after the 2013 season, was meant to return this year. Unfortunately, it seems the FIA and the Indian government they still have some tax disputes there, and of course the Grand Prix in Jersey will never happen. So that is the 2015 calendar, and to race these 20 races this season, we've got 10 teams, and I'm going to present them in constructor standings order that I think they'll end up this year, starting from the bottom to the top. So let's start right at the bottom, and it's a miracle this team even made it to Australia, but it doesn't look like they're going to be challenging for points anytime soon, and that is the Manor Marussia team. Well, I am pretending to be an armchair expert here. So Manor Marussia, and what a badly needed feel-good story for everyone after the past couple of months, when they announced a few weeks ago they would be able to attend the Australian Grand Prix, that they had got the investment that they needed, and it looks like they're going to do the whole of the 2015 season as well. As when they went into administration back in October last year, they had a couple of investors linked here and there to maybe help the team, but no one stuck, and for most of the off-season it looked like they would go the way of Caterham and just not exist now. But thankfully they found their saviour in Stephen Fitzpatrick, the founder of OVO Energy in 2009, someone who's been interested in motorsports for a while and looked to invest in Ferrari before he invested in Manor Marussia. They've also brought in Justin King as chairman, the father of GP2 and Manor Marussia development driver Jordan, and also the former CEO of Sainsbury's, and he's been at the likes of Marks and Spencer's, Asda, Pepsi Cola, Mars, Häagen-Dazs as well. He's got great business experience, and so with those two leading, overlooking the financial side of the team, it looks like they got great couple of guys there, and that's perhaps one of the key aims for this team for this season, to build up that financial side of the team, build it up from the ground upwards, just have a solid foot in there for the team to attract investment throughout the season. As we've seen their car in Australia, and they haven't got many sponsors on it at the moment, and just for them to build investment into this team for this year, and then hopefully build on that in 2016 and 2017 to push this team forward and maybe up the grid as well, and do something that the likes of say Minardi before them were never able to do. So for Manor Marussia, the financial side is very important for them this year. That's why they got a couple of paid drivers as well in those seats. And for John Booth, the team principal, and Graham Nelden, the executive director, though, it's not just about the financial side, it's about the racing side as well, and how well they do out on track. And that looks like it's going to be very hard for them to not shake off that marker role for the whole of the season if they do that, and particularly for the first few races, as they've had to adapt their 2014 car into the 2015 regulation. They can apply for them for the first few races at least, until they introduce their 2015 car, probably likely in say Barcelona in May, I would guess. And it looks like they were well advanced of their 2015 car anyway, from the assets that we saw that they had in late last year. So for Manor Marussia, it's going to be a bit of a struggle, at least for the first few races, and with the way the cars have moved forward quite a few seconds from last year, it seems like, from pre-season testing there. They might even struggle to qualify at least for a few races, but just getting going at least this season, it will be good for them. Just getting some track time, they've had no testing, they're behind on their, of course, on their 2015 car. It's going to take a long time to get used to that, and of course get used to just being at the back of the grid in 2015 as well for the first few races with the old car, and working with the new drivers and building up this team as well, as they lost lots of staff members as well as rival teams over the winter months with the administration. They've had to let go of lots of guys, so lots of people. So for Manor Marussia, it looks like it's going to be difficult in the beginning, but they do have a guy they're familiar with in one of their seats, a guy who was with Manor or Marussia last year before he had his Grand Prix debut with Caterham in Abu Dhabi. And Will Stevens was a solid front runner and Formula Runner 3.5, but could never push on to quite get that title challenge. Last year he won the opening round of the 2014 Formula Runner 3.5 season, but he could never push on like the likes of Roberto Meri and of course, Carlos Sainz Jr. could do and challenge for the title. So, yeah, for Will Stevens, very solid performer in Formula 3.5. He looks like he could be just a very solid driver for the team as well. Familiar with the team from last year, even though, as I said, it's very different from last year for Marussia. So, they have a very solid guy in Will Stevens in one seat, and a guy, at least for the opening rounds, it seems, in Roberto Merhi. As I said, his former rival for Formula 3.5 last year. And Merhi was, pushed Carlos Sainz at times in the championship, but Carlos Sainz Jr. just responded brilliantly, and Merhi just couldn't keep it up, and in the end he finished third in that championship, I believe, behind Pierre Gasly, another Red Bull Junior driver who's in GP2 this year, who finished run up to Carlos Sainz Jr. last year. But for Merhi, who finished third in Formula 3.5 last year, is signed on for Formula 3.5 this year with the Pons team, I believe. So, yeah, he might not be there for the whole season. We just don't know. He's there for at least the first few races. And for Merhi, yeah, he's got experience with Caterham as well. Was promised an Abu Dhabi drive, and he looks like Will Stevens beat him to that. So, yeah, these guys are very familiar with each other, and so, yeah, they should get along at least, and that would be good for the team. At least they've got teammates that are good chemistry together, even though they are rookie teammates. And yeah, it's going to be tough for the team to just develop throughout the whole of this season with the lack of budget, and of course being behind with that car as well. Got lots to learn on that 2015 car. Once it rolls out, and they're spending the next few races just running with that. But at least they've got their Ferrari power plant in the back, and that power plant looks like it's evolved a bit from last year. So that's the good thing for Marussia. At least it looks like they're, at least in a better financial footing than they were last year, and that can only bode well for the team, at least for this year, maybe going forward, as I said, if they get investment. But in general, for Marussia, it's just about building a solid base this year, just surviving this year, and attracting investment, and hopefully they can qualify for every race, finish most races at least with Will Stevens, and maybe Roberto Merhi and whoever else is going to be in that second seat. But yeah, just hopefully they can last the season for Marussia, and that's probably their goal, just to finish 10th in the standings. And looks like maybe the looks like they're just not going to challenge for points this year like they were able to, of course, on one particular occasion last year. But yeah, for Marussia, hopefully just have a nice time at the back of the grids, and as I said, build that base going forward. Coming off the back of their worst season in Formula 1, you would have thought Sauber would have liked some optimism heading into 2015, and they did have some of that in pre-season testing, as Felipe Nasr and Marcus Ericsson did post some great times, but they did look a bit like glory runs to attract sponsors. As you may have noticed, the delivery for 2015 was a bit more colourful than the past couple of seasons. Was quite sparse on the sponsor front. You mainly just see Felipe Nasr's and Marcus Ericsson's sponsors. But for 2015, the team run by Marussia Kaltenborn, the team principal of the past couple of seasons, she has had a couple of difficult seasons to lead the team through. And for 2015, it looks like she made quite a fatal error for the team as well, as they're fighting Guido van der Garde and his right for a seat for 2015, as his contract was recognised by the Contract Recognitions Board and has been recognised by the Victoria Courts in Australia as well. So that's led to a tricky situation where you have 3 drivers for 2 seats, and Felipe Nasr, who was 3rd place in GP2 last year, Marcus Ericsson, who was running with Caterham last year, have quite rightfully got the right to those 2 seats, but so has Van der Garde. So it's a bit tricky for Sauber. They've either got to pay off Van der Garde, and I'm sure the Nasr and Ericsson sponsors didn't expect to be doing that for their 2015 money, or they're going to have to push aside some. But it looks like it may just be a payoff, and we don't know how good that is for Sauber with their critical financial situation. I mean, they needed Ericsson and Nasr to pay up front for their seats to just keep going until 2015. So it's a tricky situation for Sauber even before the 2015 season. But they got a nice tidy car, it seems, designed, and at least in pre-season testing it looks decent. They'll just be hoping to score at least some points for the first time since 2013, since Hulkenberg scored points with the team. So it's been a long while for them just to score points, but it looks like some other teams are going to be having bigger improvements than them, such as Lotus and Toro Rosso ahead of them. And that's a big problem for Sauber, where they have 16 drivers and seats in front of them, which look very close, well, in the most part, particularly in the midfield, and look better than them. And the key for them to score points is to break through that kind of little barrier they've got there and be part of that midfield gaggle, as they've got Marussia behind them. For the most part, it seems for the whole season they will, but to end up not finishing in 9th place in the Constructors' Championship this year, they've got to break through that barrier and score quite a few points, and at least have more points than, I think, say, Toro Rosso, who look optimistic for this season but have rookie drivers. So at least they've got a driver in Ericsson who has F1 experience, but they do have a rookie driver in Felipe-Nasr, who was quite highly rated before his GP2 adventures a few years ago, but he hasn't been really impressive in GP2. Last year he finally started winning races in the category, but didn't challenge his former teammate Jerome Palmer to the title. Palmer just ran away with it. So in the end, he got beaten by Stoffel Van Dorn as well in the a rookie in GP2. So for Felipe-Nasr, he's kind of got to rebuild his stock here with this Sauber. See if he can get some impressive performances behind him, beat Ericsson and get a few points on the board. That would be good for him, and that would be good for Sauber as well, just to get a few points on the board and just, rack up the total once again. For Marcus Ericsson, though, he was kind of impressive a bit with Caterham in their last, echelons of life on the F1 grid, particularly in Russia. He's just a 10th away from being in Q2 in qualifying, then he out-qualified, I think, Felipe-Nasr in the Williams, and he kind of outshone Kobayashi. I know Kobayashi might have been distracted by his going-ons with the team, but Ericsson did step up a bit towards the end of the year. He did have that rookie start to the season, but he kind of grew as the team kind of fell apart, unfortunately, and with a more stable team in 2015, hopefully he can show himself to be, belonging on this grid more than Adrian Sito and Esteban Gutierrez showed last year, admittedly in a pretty terrible car though for Sauber. So at least they don't have an overweight car to start the year with for Sauber, and the drivers don't have to, fast themselves to almost ridiculous levels to, for the car to be competitive. But for Sauber, just scoring points, and hopefully with the Van der Garde, the verdict there, they can somehow work going forward with mostly 2 drivers in Nasr and Ericsson, and they can move this team forward and hopefully not fall behind in their development race and just show themselves to be a solid Grand Prix team. At least there are going to be huge question marks about Marussia Keltenborn's running off this team going forward for the rest of the year, particularly with this, of course, this Van der Garde situation. But for Sauber, just having a solid year under the belt with some points scored would be nice for them, even if they are going to be finishing low down in the Constructors' table. I'm not sure if I'm harsh to Toro Rosso, predicting them only to finish 8th in the Constructors' standard. That's even down from 2014, where they produced a very solid 7th place there. They're quite an anonymous midfield team. Sure, we recognise their drivers, but we don't recognise the team behind it a lot. We just know they're the other Red Bull team. They're the B team. They're the kind of the young driver program actually in F1. They're the ones who have these young drivers in the team to prove if they are good enough to step up to Red Bull, and if they're not, they're gone, and the other guys off the conveyor belt are brought in. But if they are, they go to Ricciardo and Kvyat, and we don't know how long they'll be in the Red Bull seats, and then they got another couple of guys to prove that maybe they can replace those guys in the Red Bull. They're basically just a factory, Toro Rosso, for Red Bull. That's how we kind of see them. We recognise the drivers, as I said. We recognise the project coming out of the factory. We just don't recognise the factory. So, yes, it's a year for Toro Rosso to perhaps step out of that shadow for a very important year for the team. They're celebrating a decade in F1 now, and they've very much moved on from what Minardi could achieve, because they've had the investment from Red Bull, which Minardi had never had investment on that scale, and never had the kind of engine and the partnerships that Toro Rosso has with Red Bull to be able to achieve nothing more than being at the back of the grid. Well, Toro Rosso have achieved more than being at the back of the grid. Now they even beat Red Bull, for God's sake, in 2008. But in this era now where, there's no longer as much help that they can get from Red Bull. Now they've got to design their own cars, of course. Toro have been quietly designing very neat, tidy cars with the help of James Key in recent years and with Giorgio Ascanelli before then. They designed very tidy cars. They've just been worrying about, say, reliability last year, or just been worrying about what drivers they're going to have in their cars. And so that hasn't really helped Toro Rosso move forward, having this chopping and changing of the driver lineup all the time. But even saying that, Frank Tost is very optimistic for this season, as he knows James Key has designed another solid F1 car like he did at Force India, like he did at Sauber before then, and like he did last year as well. The big issue for Toro Rosso coming into this year is not reliability. Once again, it's that driver pairing for them. They predict to finish 5th in the constructors' standings, and that could be achievable with the way the midfield looks heading into this season. But the big question mark is that driver pairing, and that's why I only have them 8th heading into this season in the constructors' standings. Has Carlos Sainz Jr. and Max Verstappen, they're very good in junior formula, but this is the big stage, and especially for Verstappen, it'd be interesting to see how he handles being in F1. For Carlos Sainz Jr., he's been around for a few years now, promising big things, and he's had a very up and down road to F1. His season in GP3 he showed great pace, but he was hitting things left, right and centre, and only finished 10th in the championship. Then he repaired his reputation altogether in 2014, leading and winning that championship in Formula Renault 3.5 when even things went a bit wrong in the mid-season and Roberto Merhi was getting close to him in the championship. He just responded by winning in Catalonia, I believe, and Paul Ricard, he just responded, and that's a very good sign for Toro Rosso that they got a driver who seems to have learned during his junior Formula career. And what's a junior Formula career without just being lessons and learning? And it certainly looks like Carlos Sainz Jr. did that last year, and he's coming into Formula 1 with confidence as well, and that's something that's perhaps not been there as well in his junior Formula career as well, as I said, been very up and down. For Max Verstappen, he's just the new kid on the block. He just rocketed in and said, yeah, I'm getting an F1 drive, thanks and goodbye. And that was in his first year of car racing, and that's perhaps the only time the last time we will see this such of thing in F1 with the new super license rules coming in from 2016 onwards. So for Max Verstappen, he came in last year, didn't even finish second actually in the F3 European Championships. He got beaten to that by Tom Blomqvist, and it was Esteban Ocon who won that championship, the young Lotus driver who's in GP3. And we probably would have been wiser for Verstappen to be in GP3 this year. But he's been handed this Red Bull seat, or the Toro Rosso seat, by Red Bull, and it'd be interesting to see how the 17-year-old, the youngest driver ever, and probably will be the youngest driver ever in F1, as I said, with those super license changes, how he copes with it. He seems very mature. He's been very mature throughout it. He's been very calm. He's been much mature than other drivers who have had years in junior formula have entered F1. He's been much better than some of them. Yeah, for Verstappen, it is just going to be interesting to see how he copes. He is the most interesting rookie to look out for. He's the most interesting driver, perhaps, to look out for on the grid, and just see how he copes with this season. It will be up and down. It will be rocky. It will be rocky for Toro Rosso as well, with the rookie pairing with the youngest driver pairing on the grid, and perhaps the youngest driver pairing we're going to ever see in F1 at only being 37 years combined. That's just a couple of years older than Button and Raikkonen. So yeah, it is insane looking at how young the driver pairing is, and how insane it is going to be for Toro Rosso, how they're going to develop this car throughout the year. Yes, it's got a very solid base. It seems like they sorted out the reliability issues throughout the second half of last year and during the off season, but how are they going to develop it pace wise throughout the year with this young driver pairing? That's the big question. And for the Renault power unit as well, as they're the only team apart from Red Bull to have that Renault power unit. How are Renault going to advance that power unit during the year as well, and develop it with a couple of rookie drivers and not much experience in the Red Bull team? So yeah, for Toro Rosso, it looks optimistic for them in pre-season, but during the season it could be a lot different for them, and that's why I only have them 8th predicted in the constructors' standings. Even though I think Carlos Sainz Jr. may be okay, even though he may bash a few things. Max Verstappen may be very mature, but how is he going to perform and handle it as the season goes on? Of course, he's got his father here, Jos Verstappen, who's a F1 veteran, alongside him there to help with that, and it looks like Verstappen is mature anyway. But yeah, Toro Rosso, let's actually look out for the team this year, even though once again it looks like the driver pairing will be overshadowing them once again. And of course, as I said, we will be looking at what Max Verstappen does this season. And so in 7th, I predict another team had a very difficult off-season in Force India. The VJ-Meyer owned team had money troubles over the off-season. It seemed like they didn't even, or could even, test their car in pre-season, but they managed to get it out for the 3rd test in Barcelona, and it did an alright job. But of course, it's testing. Grand Prix are a very different thing, and they have a solid driver pairing in Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez, though, both finishing in the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship last year in 9th and 10th positions. But for the team, unfortunately, lost out of 5th position to McLaren in the end, despite a great drive from Hülkenberg and Perez in Abu Dhabi. And so their aim for Force India will be just to retain that 6th place spot. Probably they finished 6th for 3 of the past 4 seasons now, and it seems like that's their place on the F1 grid. It seems just to be this very solid midfield team. Of course, they want to step it up, score more podiums like they did in Bahrain last year. But this troubled off season we saw with Lotus, we've seen with Toro Rosso last year, that kind of a troubled off season is very difficult to get out of, and particularly in Lotus's case, they never really recovered from that difficult off season that they had. So for Force India, they missed the first couple of pre-season tests. They're behind on the car. They will be behind on the car for at least the first few races, but once they get into a rhythm, maybe solid point scoring finishes will be their hope, particularly with Nico Hülkenberg, who for the first half of last year just finished in the points, kept racking it up. But in the second half of the year, when the car wasn't quite there for him, Perez stepped up and he started racking up the points. So they got a very solid driver pairing here. But for Sergio Perez, he's basically holding up this team with his Mexican money. It's a bit increased for this year, and he's got to increase his performance as well for this year. As I said, during that first half of the year, he may have got the podium in Bahrain, but he's overshadowed by Nico Hülkenberg, and he's always been overshadowed by his teammate, apart from 2012 alongside Kobayashi. So for Perez, he's got to be just more consistent. He's consistently inconsistent. He does the fantastic performances such as in Bahrain, such as he was showing in Canada until that last lap crash, but he's not backing it up with solid points finishes in between those. And even in the second half of last year, as I said, he's racking up points, but again, he was up and down a bit, especially when the team sorted out the car in the second half of last year in those last few races. Once they figured out, they're going the wrong direction, aero-wise, the upgrades didn't work. They figured out a way to make that car work for the last couple of races, and so Hülkenberg was working in those last couple of races. So there might be indictment of Hülkenberg days, perhaps not as good with a car that struggles a bit, but he's good when the car is good a bit. That's what's said with Jenson Button as well, when they say he's not good with a bad car, but he's shown with the McLaren the past couple of years he's pretty good with a car that's not quite there performance-wise, as much as the team would have wanted anyways. So for Hülkenberg, just continue what he's doing, but for Hülkenberg, it might be a case of this is his last season in midfield team. He's got to step up to a top team to achieve all of these things that were hoped with his stellar junior Formula career, one of the best on the grid alongside Hamilton, his junior Formula career. So to finally fulfill all those potentials of wins and maybe challenge for championships, for Hülkenberg, he's perhaps got to see this as his last year in Force India and to really impress, and to finally step up a team where he can score podiums, where he can score wins, and where he can challenge for championships. Maybe that Ferrari seat that Raikkonen's still clinging on to could be his in the future. So for Hülkenberg, he's got to impress. For Perez, he's got to step forward and show that he can be consistent, that he can be a performer all during this season. But for Force India mainly, it's just about survival. Of course, as I said, Perez is bringing in big money, Hülkenberg's bringing in some, but for the team, they haven't got not much sponsorship there, unfortunately, particularly with the troubles with the team owners, with the guy from Sahara in India. They're having big troubles. So for Force India, yeah, just hoping to survive going forward after not really paying the partners, it seemed, and struggling to pay the partners in the off-season. If they can, continue racking up the points, get another top 6 finish, that would help them. But as you can see, I predicted them for 7th. That wouldn't be good for them at all, particularly going forward financially into 2016 and onwards. And we could see them having trouble, paying the partners again in the next off-season, 2015 off-season. But yeah, for Force India, just racking up some points, getting over their troubles in this early part, then racking up the points. And for Hülkenberg and Perez, it's big seasons for them to impress and to put themselves in shop windows, maybe. So for Force India, yeah, they need a very solid season again. I'm not sure if I'm being generous to McLaren when I say they're going to get a top 6 this year in the constructors' standings, as they've been fighting for 5th spot the past couple of years, but they've had a very tough off-season, gelling this partnership with Honda this off-season with this power unit, just not running enough meaningful laps to get anything, it seems, this off-season with the Honda power unit. So they're very much on the back foot entering this 2015 season. Of course, they've lost their star signing Fernando Alonso for Australia, and hope he recovers in time for Malaysia. He certainly seems to be recovering in time, if you judge from his Twitter feed at least. So for McLaren on the back foot, they are wondering what the hell they're going to be doing for these first few races. Well, they're just aiming to finish races, get some data under the belt, get some running under their belts, and it'd be interesting to see how quickly they can get on top of these situations, just get on top of the car as well. As maybe half a season, like it could take them quite a long time, but in the second half of the season it could really pay off them, as it seems like their design, it seems good. It's like an Adrian Newey-esque design, a supermodel thin car at the back, but that's going to come with reliability issues. But if the performance is there underneath, that could be very good for them. But that's a big if at the moment, as we don't really know their performance from pre-season. So for McLaren, it is a very different era, ending their 20-year association with Mercedes, after winning a couple of titles, and having the best power unit last year as well, going to an unknown in Honda in 2015, and Honda and McLaren are a year behind the rest as well in this power unit era. Compared to Mercedes, compared to Ferrari, they've had a year with their power unit. They've developed it all. Honda, they're coming in now. They haven't had a year to get some data under the belt and develop it going forward. And so, yeah, Honda very much on the back foot compared to Renault, Mercedes and Ferrari as well in the power unit states, even though they are now allowed to develop their power unit in season, which is a very reasonable move and should have been expected move from FIA as well. So for Honda and McLaren, very much on the back foot. They've got this new era. McLaren have been building for this new era for over the past couple of years, recruiting from all over the place. They've got Eric Bouillet as the team principal there, or the racing manager side under as well. They've got Ron Dennis overseeing the whole racing side now as well. The road car side, of course, has a relationship with Honda way back from the 80s and 90s, when they had one of the most successful partnerships in the history of F1 in that period. So for McLaren, they've got very solid leadership. They've got a very solid chief designer. It now seems in Mark Pedromo, or Peter Pedromo. One day I'll get his first name right. From Red Bull, from that Adrian Newey stable, one of those very solid guys who was working with Newey to build those very fast Red Bulls in the past couple of years. So yeah, they've got a very good guy leading that team, and of course he was with McLaren before as well, before he went to Red Bull. So he's very familiar with how McLaren works. So it seems like they've got the right people in McLaren at least. It's just whether they can work out this issue with, get this team up to speed, this new era up to speed this year, or if it will take 2016. And yeah, if they can work with Honda to get this period going forward, as it's very much stalled at the moment. And they're coming off a couple of very disappointing seasons for them as well, just fighting for 5th spot in the constructors' table. They want to push forward and get into the top 5 and top 3, and then of course challenging for the title in the next couple of years. And they've had a setback already with Fernando Alonso, as I said, but he's the guy they want to see in the next couple of years push this team forward if Fernando sticks around, and it certainly looks like he will do, as it looks like Hamilton and Rosberg will be at Mercedes for the next couple of years. So for Alonso, he's now got this challenge as well, another challenge in his career. It failed at Ferrari. He kind of failed at McLaren as well to deliver what he wanted, which he did in Renault in the mid-thousands. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he can cultivate an environment to do that, and he's just the driver to be able to do that as well. He works as hard as a Schumacher or a Vettel. He just doesn't seem to be able to get the people around him like a Schumacher or a Vettel, it seems. So for Alonso, a very big challenge, and one to prove some doubts about him, being as this interpersonnel, person. Can he cultivate a team around him? Can he just basically lead McLaren to the front? And he kind of failed that with Renault in 2008, 2009 as well. So yeah, lots of question marks over Alonso heading into the season. Can he answer all of them? Can he now outshine Button as well in Button's team? He's been here for 5 seasons now, Button. He's very much used to McLaren way. He's used to the Honda way as well. He effectively won a world title on a Honda car with the Brawn in 2009. So, Alonso's got lots of question marks against him there. And as I said, Button's very familiar with everything that Honda and McLaren will be doing this season. And for Button, it's the end of career for him, and people are going to be questioning why they kept him instead of, say, Magnussen, that new breed. And so Button's got to prove that to the people, that he did belong sticking with this team in 2015. He's been extremely good for McLaren, particularly in 2014 and 2013 when they haven't had the car. So if he can continue that form alongside Alonso, he might be a bit of a problem, a bit more than, say, Massa was alongside Alonso. He might be a bit of a problem for Alonso. And that can only mean good things for McLaren and Honda going forward, as a couple of experienced guys, over 500 Grand Prix behind them. Most experienced driver pairing on the grid. Age-wise as well. Had their ages together. They'll be retiring. So yeah, for McLaren and Honda, they have got a lot to do this season. For Button, just to prove a bit, that he should belong in the F1 grid. For Alonso to prove everything. He's got loads of questions about him to prove everything wrong, but will McLaren Honda have the car to help those guys prove that? That is the biggest question mark of all, and how quickly this project goes along. But there's question marks for 2016, 2017, but for 2015, can they get this project going and salvage maybe a top 6 finish? That looks like the aim. So yeah, basically lots of question marks for McLaren Honda heading into this season. So I have a team that struggled very badly last season to return to a top 5 place in the constructors standings, and that is Lotus, run by Gerard Lopez, the chairman of Genti Capital. He's still the team principal for Lotus as well. And last year you would have thought someone would have come in the off season to replace him, but it seems like he's very comfortable in that team principal role, and he's done a solid job in the difficult circumstances Lotus seem to be in. They're still struggling financially. They're relying very much on Maldonado's money to keep going as well, but they're still going, and seems like they had a very solid car this off season. The Enstone team have ended their 20-year association with Renault, including being owned by Renault from 2002 to 2010. They were the Renault team, but now they've moved on to the Mercedes power plant, a much better power plant, the power plant to be with, it seems, for 2015. It certainly was in 2014, and it seems like it's a much better place for the team with this power unit in the back of their car. The chassis seems to be much better. Nick Chester, technical director, seems to have done a very solid job, at least in pre-season, with this chassis. It seems to be a much better going forward. It seems to be much more stable, and that was the thing they really struggled with in 2014, the stability of this chassis and just making it work, especially for the drivers who had such a short window to make that car work. And Grosjean did make it work on occasion, particularly in China and Spain. For Maldonado, he got it working in America, of course. But for the drivers, they're hoping to be taking advantage of a much improved car. With Maldonado in particular, he kind of struggled. As he saw in free practice, he had a couple of offs where he just couldn't handle the car. He really struggled with it, and he only scored 2 points with it. And that's the case with Maldonado. He struggles in cars that are pretty bad to drive, but once you give him a good car like the 2012 Williams, he will perform, and that's what we're hoping to see with Maldonado this year. He's kind of cut out being aggressive to other drivers. Yeah, he had that issue with Gutierrez, but Gutierrez got him back in Britain when Maldonado got him in Bahrain, and he had the contact with Ericsson. But apart from that, there was nothing for Maldonado to report on the being aggressive against other drivers front, and so that's good to see. Hopefully the internet will die down at being angry for him this season, and he will show himself to be a very competent driver like he showed in GP2 on his way to the title in 2010. God, it's 5 years ago already. So yeah, for Maldonado, he is now 30. He's on the wrong side of 30 now, and yeah, he's got to show that maturity that Alain Promain said last year, that he was mature in that situation when Renault struggled, and Grosjean was, a bit more whiny, a bit more, complaining about things, while Maldonado just took what he had and tried to produce the best with it. So hopefully he can do that approach this year and show that, yeah, he does belong in the grid. He's more than just this driver who's propping up a team with money. And for Grosjean, he hopes to return to form. Yes, he scored more points than Maldonado last year, but it seemed like he's struggling more than Maldonado with the car, even though he performed quite reasonably compared to Maldonado. They were quite similar last year, actually. But Grosjean, particularly in the second half of the year, just seemed to be waiting for a car that was good, and it looks like this year's car is good, and hopefully he can show the form that he showed in 2013 and reproduce that to some extent this year. Maybe not getting the podiums, maybe not getting lots of top 5 finishes, but at least returning to be a point scoring team on most weekends. And that's what I think Lotus will be this year, a top 5 team once again, a team that you can rely on to maybe getting Q3 most of the time, but particularly scoring points on the regular. And that's what I think Grosjean and Maldonado will do. I think this will be Maldonado's best season in F1, at least with the car it looks like, much more stable. And for Grosjean as well, I think it'll be, again, return to form. But in general for Lotus, I'll be concerned about the development race for them, but at least initially it looks like they have a good car to capitalise. It'll be, again, a Force India situation like last year, starting off well in the first half of the year, then hoping they can keep up in the second half of the year. And I sincerely hope that Lotus is a good problem for them to have compared to last year. So for Lotus, just a return to form. It seems we're going through the part of the constructors table where the teams are having loads of changes, and Red Bull is certainly one of them, as they've seen their dream team from the last few years just dismantle and go all over the place, with like Rebo at the World Endurance Championship, Vettel at Ferrari now, and Adrian Newey designing his last Red Bull before he goes on consults on Ben Ainsley's America's Yacht Challenge, and helps, along with Martin Whitmarsh, bring the America's Cup back to Britain for Ben Ainsley. And for Red Bull, it's going to be a very challenging year for them. It's going to be a very different year for them compared to even 2014, where they were full of confidence after 4 years winning world titles with Vettel for themselves as well. And then Mercedes just showed up and rocked up with a much better car than they did in 2014. For 2015, they kind of know what to expect now heading into it, where they're being less optimistic in pre-season. They know they're perhaps not going to challenge Mercedes, maybe not even Williams as well, and they'll be mainly fighting Ferrari, it seems, for third place in the constructors' standings. So for Red Bull, they've altered their expectations, but they've still got a very good team principal, one of the best on the grid in Christian Horner, even though his comments on cost savings seem to be a bit out of whack. I'm sure his fellow members of the strategy group are very happy with that. And they have Helmut Marko there to help, and they still have investment from Dieter Mateschitz, so they still have a few elements from that dream team to help move them forward. It's a bit like Ferrari when they still had John Todt once everyone left the building, in 2007, and they won the world title with Kimi Raikkonen. So you never know, you could see the same, maybe not the drivers or constructors, but you could see a strong performance for them at least in 2015, before really in 2016 it will be really lower their expectations and see what happens, even though they do of course have a very solid group underneath those top people who have dispersed everywhere. We saw that on the driver front as well with Daniel Ricciardo last year. Even though Vettel's gone, they got Daniel Ricciardo, who replaced Webber last year and won 3 titles, and had just adapted to that Red Bull last year in 2014 with the less rear downforce which Vettel craved in those dominant years. That wasn't there for him unfortunately last year, and it just seemed Ricciardo coped with that a bit better, but this year's going to be very different for him. He no longer has that experience of a four-time world champion alongside him. He now leads the team, and everyone's going to be looking to him to help develop the team. So it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to his team leader role, where everyone is looking at him in the team, and he's got to help push this team forward as well, as they're one of only two teams with the Renault power unit. Of course, sister team Toro is the other one. So Renault are going to look to him as well for helping on the engine side, because they don't have much data to go through to help develop this power unit, compared to Mercedes and Ferrari, who have lots more teams there to help. So for Ricciardo, it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to the team leader role. Be interesting to see how Red Bull copes this year as well and develops forward. And for Daniel Kvyat, who has had a rapid rise from a GP3 champion at the end of 2013 to a Red Bull driver in 2015 after a decent rookie year in 2014 at Toro Rosso, but Verne outperformed him near the end of that year. He did have the high, qualifying performance, particularly in Russia at his home race, that 5th spot. But in races, sometimes he just fell off a bit and didn't perform, and we've seen that was actually a criticism of Verne as well, compared to Ricciardo. He just fell off in races. He was stuck in the midfield fighting. For some reason, Ricciardo has this knack of finding clear air in races and manages to put down the hard laps, and that really helps in that middle phase of the race to get those finishing finishes in the end. For Kvyat, we didn't see that last year. Only had a handful of points compared to Verne. So it'll be interesting to see how he manages his races at the front of the grid now. We see he's got the raw speed, but does he have the racecraft like Ricciardo had last year? Ricciardo had a great strategic mind, particularly sort of hungry, to get a win from virtually nowhere. Can Kvyat get like a podium from nowhere like that, or get some solid top 5 finishes? I still have my question marks about Kvyat being in a top role so soon as well in his Formula 1 career. He's only 20, 21. It's incredible that he's got that seat already at Red Bull. So for Kvyat, he's got a lot to prove, and he's got a lot to show that he is worth this so much faith from Red Bull to replace Sebastian Vettel with him. Of course, lots of drivers were linked to that seat, but Red Bull stuck in-house, and be interesting to see if Kvyat can cope with being in a top team in 2015. Can Ricciardo lead a team in 2015, and how well Red Bull going to go without Sebastian Vettel in 2015? For third in the constructors table, it seems like it's going to be a toss-up between a team that's coming out of the end of their dream team era and a team that's hoping to have another dream team era. Ferrari, it is all changed for them in 2015, a very different change for them as well, especially even compared to 20 years ago when Schumacher came. This is a much bigger change for Ferrari than even back then, as they have replaced almost everything. Before Luca de Montezemolo almost replaced everything before then, as well as kind of a blame culture it seemed to be in Ferrari, with lots of sackings and lots of change in personnel, as we even saw last year with Stefano Domenicali leaving as team principal, being replaced by Marco Mattiacci, the former head of Ferrari in North America. But for Luca de Montezemolo, that was perhaps the kind of a sad end to his reign as the head of the Ferrari part of the Fiat family, after almost a quarter of a century in that role, since returning to that role in the 1991, I believe. So in general for him, it's been over a 30 year association with Ferrari, and in his place comes Sergio Marchionne, I apologize I said that wrong, who is the head of Fiat and now is the head overseeing the F1 Ferrari team, and is hoping for success. He says success brings sales for the cars, and the figures say otherwise, I believe. In De Montezemolo's reign, I think they had their best figures actually on the road car side in last year, I believe. But for Marchionne, he wants car sales, particularly to be successful in, say, the United States Grand Prix, to be successful in America and help those sales over there. And that's Marchionne. He wants Ferrari to be successful once again on the F1 grid, and to bring in someone as well in November getting rid of Marco Mattiacci, a guy with a sales and marketing background, to be replaced by a guy with a sales and marketing background in Maurizio Arabeni. I apologize I said that wrong as well, who's been associated with Philip Morris for the most part for almost 20 years now. Is a very big understanding, thorough understanding, as Marcioni says. That's the reason why he's brought in Maurizio, as he has a very thorough understanding of not just Ferrari but F1 and the governance of the sport and how the sport works, and that's something that we can't really say about Mattiacci that he had, and to a lesser extent Domenicali as well. And so it seems like Ferrari are definitely building another dream team like they just did with Michael Schumacher 20 years ago. I'm sure we've got bored of that comparison in the off season, but this is definitely a new era for Ferrari, and there are no punches pulled in how they are going to do that, as they have a 4-time world champion, another German world champion in Sebastian Vettel, leading this new era of Ferrari after leaving his home in Red Bull after many years. With the main Red Bull team, he was there for 6 years. It brought him 4 world titles, brought the team 4 world titles as well, as it faced its successful partnership with Christian Horner there, with Helmut Marko, with Adrian Newey, and that team has been disbanded now at Red Bull, and now he has gone as well, and he is leading a new team here at Ferrari, with James Allison leading the technical side, with Pat Fry now gone as well. And a bit different from the Schumacher era though is that he's got a very solid driver alongside him. He's got a world champion alongside him in Kimi Raikkonen, and both drivers and the team, everyone in this kind of project has something to prove. For Raikkonen, he had his worst season in F1 in 2014, just couldn't get used to the front end of that Ferrari, just wouldn't go into the corners like he would like, apart from a couple races such as in Belgium at Spa, where I believe he got his best finish off the 2014 season with 4th place. But Raikkonen, we're hoping that will happen more regularly in 2015. He seems much happier with the front of the car this season in pre-season testing at least. So for Raikkonen, he's got something to prove as he heads into the twilight of his F1 career. He's the oldest guy on the grid. I believe he's got over 200 Grand Prix under his belt now. He's someone who's very much just got a year or two left in F1. I believe this could even be his final season in F1, and he would want to go out on a high and prove himself that, yeah, I haven't lost it. I am still a very solid driver and an asset to any team on the grid, but I just want to go off and do some rallying or do something else. So for Raikkonen, he's got something to prove to himself and prove to the everyone out there as well. For Vettel, yeah, he's got even more to prove to himself, that he can build a team up as well away from the Red Bull family. And yeah, he's got a very big challenge in front of him, and for Ferrari in general, they got a big challenge in front of them to rebuild this team from a very disappointing 4th place season last year, with only 2 podiums with Alonso in China and in Hungary. So yeah, they haven't got much more to go down. It is kind of like in the 90s, where they did struggle at the lowest point in, say, 92 and 93, and then they rebuild themselves with John Todt, with Michael Schumacher, with Russ Brawn, with Rory Byrne, with Nigel Stepney, with loads of guys coming from Benetton along with Schumacher to rebuild this new era, and having a driver lineup like Schumacher and Barrichello, who were extremely solid in their own right as well. That seems like what Ferrari are doing again. Will it work? Well, we'll find out in a couple of years, but at least for 2015, I believe they will at least rebuild some of their reputation they lost last year with a dreadful campaign. And yeah, on to Williams, who had a very successful return to the top 3 of the constructors table in about a decade, after many years in the doldrums on the bottom end of the constructors championship. And this is coming off the back of their worst season in F1 as well. So pretty good for Williams, as they had a very solid designed car from Pat Simmons, had a very solid power unit in the Mercedes, and a very solid driver pairing with the youth and experience of Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa. And they have that again going into 2015, so expect more of the same, maybe even challenging for more wins, as well, as they just got very conservative in that part when they could have got some wins in, say, Austria and Canada, they kind of settled for the podium slots instead, and expect them to be more aggressive on that front, as their rivals for 2015, such as Ferrari, Red Bull, even McLaren and Lotus, they're all going through changes, while Williams, as I said, has that continuity factor, just like Mercedes. And so continuity is quite important in F1, especially nowadays, and so expect Mercedes and Williams to be very good again this year, as it looks like that car was very solid in pre-season testing at least. And for Vitaly Bottas, he said his aim is to get a win this year, get his maiden win, and before Felipe Massa get a win as well. And he certainly showed that last year he could do that, particularly in that mid-season run of form of podiums, such as in Germany holding off Lewis Hamilton there, such as in Britain having great strategy and taking advantage of that to get second in Britain. So for Vitaly Bottas, he can definitely outrace Felipe Massa, even though Massa was quite on form at the end of 2014. But for Bottas, if he can just continues his form, that mid-season form from 2014, then yeah, we're looking at a very good driver here. He got in the top 5 of the Drivers' Championship after barely scoring in 2013 in that terrible car that Williams was only getting it in America of that 8th spot. And he certainly does like North America, so maybe put a 5 on him winning in Canada or the United States Grand Prix. But for Bottas, he doesn't really have anything to prove alongside Massa, apart from that, that wasn't a fluke last year. It wasn't just Felipe getting used to the team in 2014. I am actually that good, and Williams have certainly invested a lot in Bottas in recent years to back up that, he is that good. So for 2015, maybe he can back that up even more, and again outperform Felipe Massa, maybe even getting the top 3 of the Drivers' Championship will be his aim. And for Felipe Massa, he showed that he didn't really suffer in form in those Ferrari years. He just suffered being alongside Fernando Alonso, suffered in an environment that didn't really suit him at Ferrari. And last year, it seems like that Williams environment suited him better. It was a new challenge for him. He moved along even with Rob Smedley as well to Williams, so he had familiar friends at least in the Williams team. And for Massa, it's just a breath of fresh air for him, and a new breath of life into his career as well. And he particularly showed near the end of last year, once it seemed like he stopped crashing early on in races, such as in Australia and in Germany, that he does have some race pace. He can match Bottas on occasion and do better than Bottas as well, and I'm sure he'll be aiming to do that once again this year, finish ahead of Bottas in the drivers' standings, get a win as well, and show that those glimpses he showed at Ferrari, those glimpses he showed last year, he can consistently perform it over a season of being very fast. We know that in qualifying, but be very fast in races as well, and not just get stuck out and get caught out in particular in that middle phase of races. In particular in the Ferrari years, he just got caught out fighting people and kind of finished way behind Alonso, and he showed that on a certain extent last year with Williams. So if he can just qualify a bit better and start a bit better, and just not get caught out in those middle phases of races and gets caught fighting people as he did on occasion last year in that Williams, maybe you will challenge Bottas in the Drivers' Championship and be very good for Williams once again. But as I said, for Williams, they're just looking very solid as well. Unfortunately, there's one team that's looking a bit more solid than them, and even though Pat Simmons said that we need to invest more money to step up in 2015, it doesn't look like they need to do that in 2015. It looks like they just made a step up themselves, with some other teams stepping down. But there's one team that looks like they've made a step up, unfortunately, ahead of Williams. Guess it's no surprise who have gotten top in 2015. Just like 2014, it looks like Mercedes are the team to beat, and why need for the opposition. They look even more solid this pre-season testing than they did in 2014. They did have that kind of slight concern about reliability last year. He caught out Rosberg in Singapore, of course, in the season finale in Abu Dhabi. He caught out Hamilton in, qualifying for Germany, for Hungary. He caught out the team in Great Britain with Rosberg, caught out Hamilton in Australia as well. They did have these few reliability gremlins. That look's gone in pre-season testing already. Having one power unit throughout whole pre-season testing, they boast having the most mileage of anyone. They just look at one with this car already. Well, half the opposition are still getting used to theirs. It's very worrying for the whole of the F1 field. We could see one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen from a team this season. I'm not saying the perfect season, but it could be very close. It could be rivaling, say, the Schumacher Ferrari seasons of the early thousands, the Senna Prost McLaren years in 88 and 89, or on the 50th year anniversary actually of Jim Clark's marvellous season with Lotus in 1965. It could be right up there this season for Mercedes, and nothing has really changed for them. That's one of the big points. Continuity has been, as we've seen recently in F1, is very important, and it's like Mercedes that not much has changed on their front. They've still got Paddy though, they've got Tito Wolff leading the team with Niki Lauda in that non-executive chairman role. They've got one of probably the best driver pairing on the grid in Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg in the primes of their career. Even though Hamilton's now in his 30s, I'm sure he's not very happy about that, as he's said in the driver's press conference in Australia. But they just look incredibly solid. They got the best team around, it seems like. And for Lewis Hamilton, he finally got that kind of monkey off his back. Last year getting his second world title, which he could never achieve with McLaren, it seemed, for one way or another, especially in the Vettel years. There was the other way that got in the way, that Red Bull. But it looks like he's now got a car that can deliver him those world titles, and he's only really got Nico Rosberg to challenge him last year and this year again, it seems. And he's a very much a confidence driver, and on that side of things, his confidence is probably at the highest it's ever been in his F1 career. So note for Lewis Hamilton to be driving at his best. He's been improving in the past couple of years. 2012 he was brilliant, 13 he was brilliant, 14 again, 13 he had just a couple of issues, but in general part he was brilliant. So Lewis Hamilton looks like he's very strong once again against Nico Rosberg. He put his all into that 2014 title challenge, perhaps a bit too much if you look at the Monaco and Belgium instance in a certain light. But of course I don't look at that in those certain lights. But for Nico Rosberg, he put everything into that title challenge, and Lewis Hamilton just had that little bit more than him, especially in races. Particularly Rosberg, that has been a concern in his F1 career, his racecraft, and it certainly showed himself up in 2014, where in Bahrain he should have won the race, where in America Hamilton just snuck past him and like it was no one's business. And for Rosberg, he's got to start not having those things happen to him. He's got to be able to fight Hamilton wheel to wheel on the racetrack. That was the difference last year. If he is much better at it this year, we saw in qualifying how great he is in qualifying, outdoing Hamilton in the pole trophy battle. No one would have really expected that. So for Rosberg, he's got to back up his pace on Saturday with racecraft on Sunday. And this is probably his best chance to do it, really. He's a bit like Mark Webber in 2010. He's not really got one chance at the title. He's had that now. But he's going to be stronger now, knowing what a title fight is like. And now that he's certainly got only Lewis Hamilton to fight, he knows his opposition already. And that's important for him. So, for Nico Rosberg, he should be stronger this year. But as I said, Lewis Hamilton is going to be much stronger this year as well. And particularly if the reliability issues are not going to happen for Mercedes, they're going to be fighting each other on the track as well, and that should be good entertainment for us if it's anything like last year. And for Nico Rosberg as well, he kind of unravelled as the season went on in 2014, and I expected him to not really do that this year. I expect him to be on top of things on that side. So for Mercedes, we're just going to be waiting until they win both titles. I think I predict it may even be in the European season, maybe even in Italy. They might even win the Constructors. But I think it may be like Singapore, Japan, they will win, at least the Constructors title. And then the Drivers title, that'll be down to how well Rosberg basically performs against Hamilton. And that should be great to watch this season. So there are the runners and riders for this 2015 Formula 1 season. Hopefully it's a bit better than the 2014 season and 13 season and 12 and that. Hopefully it's the best season for quite a long time has, particularly last season, ended on really bad notes, and there'll be some carryover from, say, the financial war that we had last year, and discussing the finances in F1, as that is quite frankly one of the biggest messes in the world. Well, in general, finances all over the world, and quite a big mess. But hopefully F1 can find a reason to actually be celebrated this year. We had that beginning of last year, with the introduction of the power units, FI banging its chest about that, and no one really banging along with them. And then we had the battle at Mercedes. We actually had some racing to celebrate last year, but that was kind of lost for the last few months of last season. Hope we see some more racing we can celebrate this year, and just see some great fighting between the teams and the drivers. Have a bit of a messed up order on the constructors compared to last year. See the rise of Lotus and, say, maybe Toro Rosso, and the fall of a bit of a McLaren, or Force India. But yeah, hopefully F1 just finds a way to be covered in a bit of light this year, and finds a way just to celebrate itself a bit. I know it's been a bit hard in recent years, but hopefully there's something we can find in F1 to be quite happy and thankful for. And I kind of found that as a fan a bit hard, especially last year, to find reasons to be thankful for F1 and celebrate F1. But hopefully that's a bit better this year. I hope it's a bit more optimistic this year. Are you a bit more optimistic about this season and F1? Are you hoping it's a bit happier, and a bit, well, not happier, but a bit more kind of reasonable from both sides of everyone, as when an issue comes up, we shouldn't be banging heads, going at war with it, instead of really discussing it and looking at all the implications of it. Hopefully that will follow through with the strategy group in FIA and the lower teams as well this year. And yeah, I'm just hoping that it's a bit of a better season for F1. It can't get much worse than how 2014 ended, I don't believe. But yeah, what are you looking forward to? You're hoping there's a bit of a messed up order in the midfield, that McLaren are going to do well, overcome their pre-season issues. Look at the rookies, particularly at Toro Rosso, how well they will do. Maybe Sauber will finally score a point again. Maybe Force India will fall down a bit of their issues. Just let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you just hoping someone will finally dethrone Mercedes at the top, and maybe dethrone Hamilton as the world champion? Who do you think is going to challenge at the top, and are Manor actually going to qualify for every race, or even challenge for points this year? But yeah, just let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and salaam for watching, and I will see you next time.